Hello and welcome to another video here on 3D Art CNC. This time it's another video on the Fokoos Odin5 F3 from Fokoos Tech. I wouldn't really say this is a review, just my impressions after using the printer for a while. I did make a video on my initial impressions and unboxing when I received it, and you can check that out up in the corner right there. This printer was sent to me for free, but it is completely unbiased, this review, and I will just take all my own experience and my impressions of the printer so far. I have had some issues, and also I haven't printed as much as I would have liked with this printer, mostly because I built the Voron V0.1 and also printed a lot with that, but also, as I said, there are some minor issues with this printer, but overall I actually really liked it. But stay tuned. So, as I said, I've had a few problems with this machine, but overall I really liked it. I got the original MV3 back when that came out, and this is a really big improvement from that printer. I have modified that. I haven't modified this yet, but there are some things that I will change before I will really enjoy printing with this printer. And probably the most important thing there is the build surface. It's a glass plate with some kind of coating on it, and I've had issues with the parts lifting in the outer corners, and I also talked to some other people that have had those issues. Some prints work fine, and especially flexible, I printed a lot, and those parts seem to stick just fine, and also because the extruder has a tight filament path and is direct drive, flexible works real well. And also, of course, regular PLA prints, they turn out great, but just that small lifting in the corners is a bit annoying, and I'm thinking about replacing that glass plate or putting just a Buildtech plate on top of that glass and try it out in the future. Also, there were some things that I initially thought might become problems, or that they might be problems, but they haven't really turned out to be. And that's the belt tensioners. They have worked just fine. I haven't had to adjust them so the screw comes in contact with the belt. The spool holder, I wasn't really a fan of that design, but it has also worked just fine. And the same with the belts going, so the teeth are not actually engaging in each other. They have held up just fine. Another thing that haven't really been a problem yet is the alignment of the ribbon cable for the x-axis. The hot end is actually slightly misaligned, so the ribbon cable comes in at a slight angle, and this also makes it so when you have printed a lot, the cable actually gets pulled out slightly to be at a slight angle. It still seems to work fine, but that can potentially be a problem in the future, and I also said that initially when I got the printer. It hasn't been a problem yet, and there are also cables included, but that's one thing that I would really have liked to see them fix before releasing this printer. It's a really easy fix, and those ribbon cables are actually quite fragile, so they can break and the connectors can break. So that's one thing that I really don't like. Now, this sounds like there are just a lot of negatives about this printer, but if I, for example, go with the original MV3, there are a lot more problems that I have had with that, and things that I have had to replace around the printer, just minor things that I don't like. Here there are maybe less than 5 things that are small problems, and most of them can easily be fixed just by yourself. Some of them you don't even have to buy anything to fix the printer, and most of them are really cheap. And also the things I like with this, for example, the extruder and the gantry setup, the dual lead screws. If you're not careful, you can misalign the lead screws, so you get a gantry that is not straight. But overall, I like the dual lead screws on this, and that they are not completely restrained in the top. I recommend you loosen those bearings so the lead screws can move, so you don't get any C-banding. But that I like. Also, the quiet drivers is a very big improvement from the MV3. The fans in the control box are slightly noisy. you might be able to replace those, but they are slightly bigger fans. Not like crazy loud, but you can definitely hear those over the stepper motors. Also, I really like the interface and that you can have a plugin in the slicer, I believe. I will link that down below, and you can actually see a preview of the model on the screen, so you can see what you're going to print, and that's a feature that I definitely really like. Another really minor problem was that there was a clicking sound from the extruder when you retracted. So the idler is actually not on a lever that you push, it's like a slider that goes in, and there's a small amount of movement in that, and that moves against metal, and that's where that small sound comes from. And I also think I saw some artifacts in the prints from that moving. So I just took that out, put a small piece of tape on one of the sides, and that removed that small movement in the extruder, so you don't get the sound. And I also think the print quality improved slightly. So the tolerances there aren't perfect. It's not really an issue if you don't fix that either, but just putting a small piece of tape really helps with that. Otherwise, I really like the extruder. As I said, the path is really constrained, and also it has a volcano heater block, so you can push a lot more plastic a lot quicker if you want to put a bigger nozzle on this. Oh, and one other thing I almost forgot, the filament runout sensor. I actually was told to remove, so I contacted Fokoos because the filament runout sensor triggered. So not during a print, it worked fine, but when you started up the printer and the filament was inside the sensor, it actually reported that the filament was not there. So you have to pull it out, maybe insert it a few times before it actually triggered and let you start the print. And I was linked to a video where they just told me to remove the actual sensor. So that's really not how it's supposed to work, but because I don't really use the filament runout sensor, I was fine with removing it. But if that's the solution to the problem, it's probably a known problem to them, and you can't really expect the filament runout sensor to work. So that's not really a problem for me, but it can be for some people. So what have I actually printed with this machine? Well, I've printed most of the parts for my tiny 0.6 or 60% scale OP3D RC snowmobile. So most of the bigger parts, some parts I have printed on the Voron, but most of the bigger parts I've printed on this Fokoos, so I'll put some picture of that right now. I have also printed some other smaller test prints. Mostly I print functional parts, so I haven't really done a lot of like pretty vases and things like that, but I will put some pictures of prints right now. A really simple small modification I made to this printer was I moved the fan cooling the hot end out, so I put the actual fan protector that was on the outside between the actual fan and the heatsink, and this makes it so the fan gets a lot better flow. It doesn't affect cooling, it probably makes the cooling even better, and also it makes the fan a lot quieter because there's not that much back pressure, so it gets to flow a lot better, and that seems to work just fine. So if you want the printer to be a bit quieter and also probably the fan to last a bit longer, I suggest that you move that fan out a bit. You can use spacers if you don't want to use the fan grill, but that seems to work just fine as well. Another thing that I just want to add is that this printer is actually quite slow. I'm not sure if it's limited in firmware or if it's the focus slicer that I'm using, but it usually takes maybe 50% longer than what the slicer says, and that is also slower than, let's say, an Ender 3, so that's something you have to keep in mind. So, as a conclusion, do I actually recommend this printer? Well, it has a lot of nice features compared to, like, say, the Ender 3 or even the Ender 3 Pro. So the quiet drivers and the touchscreen and dual lead screws, direct extruder, those are all things that I really like. As I said, there are a few issues with this printer, but most of them are minor, and if you know about them before you buy it, I'd say definitely this is a better option. I haven't used all of the printers in this price range for obvious reasons, and they are coming new every week it seems like, so I can't really say that this is the best you can get, but from my experience it has worked really well, except for those few issues that can be quite easily fixed. It is a lot more expensive, or a lot compared to like the Ender 3, but like maybe 50% more expensive than the Ender 3, but for that price you also get a lot more features. Also I have talked to Fokoos, and they have also taken suggestions, so they really seem to want to improve and make this printer the best as they can, so that's really good to see from a smaller company starting out. But that's pretty much it for this video. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. But as I said, that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.